Hi folks, welcome to Tuesday's edition of the iRadio podcast videocast. No Jimmy Hutton today. Jimmy's away in the West Lothian trying to get a job, I think.
Good on him.
We've got Stuart Lockhead with
Hi
us,
there.
and I'm Norrie Stewart, just two of us today. The presser, we'll have a chat about that. Obviously, Brexit has continued to implode for the Tory government with a resignation by a top civil servant over it. The Alex Salmond Inquiry at Holyrood is ongoing. And there was something else and I've completely forgotten what it was.
I think somebody else's, one of Jimmy's favourite topics a few days ago about people not going back to work in the city centres will change things quite a lot. And that's why I said invest in Fife.
Yes. Well, let's start with a press conference. What I noticed about it today was the 2 or 3 very pointed attempts to inject what is a COVID virus press conference with not an inoculation, but politics. But the Telegraph, I think, and the Mail were the 2 culprits there. Nicola Sturgeon slapped them down and said she was here to talk about COVID, not politics.
Exactly.
Anything stand out for you today?
Having Jason Leitch there today, I think, because he's the top communicator, and he pops up on the television channels, any channel, because they've got advertising on goodness knows what channels. I don't know. I'm clear. It's without a doubt they are worried about the numbers going up. There's a quote here, I've got it as a dangerous delusion that young people are safe. She was being specific about things. She's not keen on bringing, well, last night, of course, they added to we'll call it a Glasgow cluster, because it's one way of calling it. They started off with Glasgow City, West Dunbartonshire and East Renfrewshire, just to get this right, because the First Minister got it wrong. They've added Renfrewshire, there is no West Renfrewshire, it's just Renfrewshire, and East Dunbartonshire to the restricted area. They'll be adding North and South Lanarkshire next, and then they'll have a full house, but they haven't. They've decided that they're not. She was asked, there's one other health board area in that grouping as well, and that's Inverclyde. And if you recall, a few weeks ago, it wasn't doing well when everybody else was doing fine. And it's also the poorest part of Scotland. However, it's not being considered at risk at the moment. It's getting more difficult to cope with, and the First Minister was keen to point that out. She also alerted, oh yes, we had a political question about a politician in Aberdeen. I wonder if he was a Tory, certainly a unionist.
Oh, this was Aberdeen councillor claiming that they were ready to go to phase 4.
That's the one.
I take it he was walking about with his eyes shut during the last spike in Aberdeen. That is going to be a thorn in the side of good governance. Aberdeen have been the council that have consistently opposed Scottish government decisions. And I wonder why. Aberdeen in the council that the Labour Party are in cahoots with the Tory Party to keep the SNP out of power. I see nothing but trouble from them.
Well, it's a bunch. Well, it could have been a Labour member, except officially they're not Labour anymore. They're independent.
I thought they'd sneaked back in.
I couldn't tell you honestly. The Labour
Nobody seems to be prepared to tell us whether they are Labour Party members or not.
Basically, the SNP at the last council election, the SNP was the largest party, but the Labour Party and the Tories have decided they've got the same policies anyway, so they decided to form a coalition, and they are behaving very badly. And as you say, this isn't the first time we've had, you could say, opposition from a unionist politician in Aberdeen to the restrictions.
And it is politics.
It's politics.
It is politics. It's got nothing to do with the health crisis. I mean, to claim that they're ready to move into phase 4 at the moment is, I mean, that is pure politics.
Well, I've got to give you the response from the First Minister. She said, there's only one place in the world that's anywhere near considering phase 4, and that's New Zealand, and they've just gone into full lockdown in Auckland, so they ain't happening.
That was actually Jason Leitch that said that, but he was more aggressive about answering it than Nicola Sturgeon was.
And I think we need to link the politics, the bad politics and the dangerous politics of these whoever this politician in Aberdeen is, with the protesters at Holyrood
which was another question that was asked.
Yes, and that really annoyed the First Minister. She was very careful to say that you are allowed, these are people that are anti-vaxxers, anti-masks, they don't believe the virus is real, followers of David Icke, but there are people who would be, what they might say, might be more passionate and angrier than what the First Minister said, but she did say, yes, you're allowed to protest. An interesting little point she said was, as long as you keep your distance, as long as you do social distancing or obey the rules, something like that, you can do that. She didn't want them to stop protesting, but she was angry about the message they're putting out. And
again, Jason Leitch was, I would say, stronger than her in his condemnation.
His entire presence is always a bit like that. He's very good at the communication, and he makes the point. Really, we can do without these people.
Yes, they're not helping matters. They should maybe become councillors in Aberdeen.
What other information do we glean from the presser? Every single mainland health board, or was it council? It's one of the two, it could be both. It wasn't clear, has positive cases of COVID.
I think the biggest sort of information dump was trying to explain to, now I can't remember who it was. It was the woman that told Nicola Sturgeon she didn't want an explanation of anything in her answer.
Oh, it's about testing, yes.
She just wanted her to answer the way she wanted her to answer, which was like ridiculous. And Nicola Sturgeon pointed that out to her, that it is not simple, it is complicated. And the information that she imparted was that there was more than one strand to test and trace. There were the teams that were out there knocking on doors, and then there was the capacity to test the tests that had been gathered by the trace and test teams. And that the problem at the moment is a lack of capacity. Oh, but you're not using all your capacity. Well, we're not allowed to go and kick doors down and drag people out of their houses to test them. We only test people who turn up to be tested.
And they don't know when
that number fluctuates.
Yeah, she doesn't know how many that will be. And, you know, it's demand led. And they've got, apparently they've also got, so you've got the testing centres. So they don't know how many people are going to turn up there. And then you've got the labs, and they don't know how many tests are they going to get. So, and they've got to try and keep in sync, and nobody knows because the virus doesn't tell them.
And by the way, because you are testing to capacity, that means people in London are going to have to go to Inverness to get a test because you're at capacity. Now, we want you to use all your capacity, and when one person over that capacity asks for a test, we don't want you to send them to Dublin or Belfast rather, or Inverness, or, I mean, the illogical approach of our press is unbelievable. I refuse to believe they are that stupid.
I think some of them will turn up. They don't come along. They turn up for this press briefing at the last minute, unprepared. After all, they're sitting there at a desk trying to do 1,000 words,
Well,
500 words.
I don't think that's right. I just think they want a headline. They don't want to print and inform. They want to attack. I mean, it's blatantly obvious if you're working to capacity and there's a spike, that will go over your capacity. I mean, oh.
Well, we've been told today again, we can expect the worst. I'm sitting here wondering, I know what I know. I need to be asked some questions from the idiots. The fact is that a lot of people, or she said herself, the First Minister, a lot of people who used to watch her briefing are no longer watching it. They're at work, or maybe they've moved on. There's a lot of people that never did watch, and they're taking their information, as we now know from conspiracy theorists. At the moment, the virus has returned, and it's spreading all over the world.
Talking about communication, that was one good question that was asked. Have they got any plans to use, for want of a better expression, a face that the youth will recognize? Capaldi was mentioned.
Andy Robertson.
Apparently Andy Robertson has already done something for them a few months ago. But I mean, that at least, you know, that was a sensible question. Are you looking at, you know, somebody else delivering the message so you can reach parts that other health experts can't reach?
I think Jason Leitch knows, not only is he a great communicator himself, I think he's also very aware that he needs to use influencers.
Yeah.
That reach people like this. So I don't, honestly, I don't have the information to know if they're doing well or if they're not. I don't know what else they could do.
Well, as you know, I had a Zoom conversation this morning with my brother in Australia. And my brother is actively of the left, shall we say. He's always worked in politics. And I suppose the thing I took away was they're all trying to do their best. You know, even the ones he opposes politically, they're all trying to do their best. Apart from the one or two rabid outliers, the libertarians, whose attitude seems to be, let's just open up everything, get on with it, and people that die, die. You know, and that, I don't know. It just seems very strange to me that life can be written off so cheaply by certain parts of our polity.
They start off being deluded, of course, as well, by they had this herd immunity idea. They had this story that it was just like flu. Well, to start with, it's not like flu. It's much more, it's a coronavirus, which means it's a relative of the common cold. Where's the vaccine for the common cold? Where's the immunity for the common cold? There ain't.
Well, I think the biggest thing I'll take out of these press conferences is the paucity of rigor, real, genuine, inquisitive rigor in our journalists. I've been very disappointed. Still, as you say, Brexit. You will see behind me two Daily Telegraph headlines. One with Boris, who signed and sealed this fantastic deal a few months ago. And then the next quote is, Brexit deal never made sense, PM to tell EU. So the question obviously has to be asked, why did Boris sign the deal if it didn't make sense?
Well, his excuse was either that he didn't understand it or he signed it without looking at it. Either way, he's guilty, but that's his excuse for refuting it. But obviously it has implications all over the place.
Not least Northern Ireland.
Not least Northern Ireland. And the Northern Ireland Protocol is an international treaty. Apparently there is a possibility that if they go ahead with their plans, and this is tomorrow's, internal market bill, if they go ahead with that, the EU will be able to take the UK government to the European Court in Luxembourg, and huge fines and sanctions could be imposed.
Well, if this goes ahead without alteration, they will be breaking a 300-year-old treaty, which is the Treaty of Union, because of the impact it will have on Scots law. They will be breaking the withdrawal treaty with the EU. And what's the other thing they'll be breaking? There's 3 treaties that they will, the Good Friday Agreement could be impacted by it as well. So in one paragraph, or 2 paragraphs, I think it is, they will have smashed Britain's reputation as a law keeper.
Well, what do you expect? They're a mafia government. I mean, there's no getting away from it. Of course, there is a self-interest in this issue that I have, and then 1 or 2 people have as well. If they go ahead and break an international treaty, like the one they've just signed over the Northern Ireland Protocol, then that gives the Scottish government every right to challenge the Treaty of Union.
They'll have broken. If it goes through as is, they will be able to override Scots law. And part of the Treaty of Union is that Scots law stands alone and cannot be touched by Westminster.
So, and you've got president as well. So, I mean, on the one hand, we want them to go ahead with this foolhardy behaviour, but
we want them to go ahead, but we want a reaction from Nicola Sturgeon to it, which is more than just flapping our hands and bumping our gums. We want them to physically do something. Remove our MPs from Westminster and refuse to speak to them until they start to acknowledge the Treaty of Union. It's up to our Parliament to decide what laws get changed in Scotland.
Well, it's
not up to Westminster to tell us.
It's worth throwing in a couple of things. I'm quite sympathetic to Peter Abell's position on the approach at the moment. He's very strong on saying both votes SNP, and who else is going to lead the campaign to independence apart from the SNP. But he's also very keen on the term, we should be aiming to dissolve the union, not to go for independence, because if you aim for independence can mean 1,000 different things. Everybody's got a different view what independence will mean. Whereas dissolving the union is one act, one simple thing. You dissolve the Treaty of Union. So I can get his point there.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a path to it. But I do, simply dissolving the union lacks the structure that would get international recognition. That's the problem. Without an agreement between the 2 countries, the international community might be a bit leery about dealing with Scotland.
Well, it's worthwhile referencing Peter's. Peter is producing an article a day, and some days it's 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And some days they're better than, well, some days they vary, quality, quantity, and the topic. Today he cheered me up, shall we say, and he was simply saying, where's the leadership? And he doubts, but I kind of agree with him. He thinks, yes, is the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, she doesn't seem to want to lead the campaign. She's quite happy to lead the government, but she doesn't seem to want to lead the campaign for independence. And it occurred to me today, given that we're talking about the inquiry, the Alex Salmond inquiry, we are missing, if they hadn't nobbled Alex Salmond, where would we be today?
Which is why they nobbled Alex Salmond. So
whatever the truth about Alex Salmond, the fact that he got nobbled has made a big difference to the future of the independence movement.
I said yesterday that Alex Salmond was kind of who you would want in charge of the Yes campaign, but I've rethought my position on that quite quickly. Alex Salmond is Marmite.
Well, absolutely, these days. It is now.
Well, he always was, but even more so now. So, I mean, he can't lead anything.
True, but in a way, we're missing out. We're missing a charismatic leader. Here's the other thing. I maybe mentioned it to you yesterday. It occurred to me, and I think you agreed with me. The other thing missing seems to be is a project manager. Nori and I got involved in a project management course because, and it was a bit like this. It was a period when we were waiting for outside people to do things. We were waiting for a date to come when we could go ahead and apply to start this, get this radio station going in Leith. So one of the members of the board said, well, I'll teach you all how to become project managers. So when the time came to move forward, we were up to speed, shall we say. Now, it looks like to me the independence campaign needs some world-class project management.
Well, I'm not sure that is what it needs. It needs a figurehead.
Well, yeah, plus a charismatic leader. I mean,
that is trusted. That is trusted by the Yes movement first, and as a bonus, trusted by the SNP.
They're going to find it difficult.
I can't see. There's nobody that springs immediately to mind. Having said that, the Yes movement threw up some fantastic people, 2013, 2014. None of whom looked like a leader of a political campaign. But that's not to say there aren't people there now. And we've got a lot more people to choose from now.
Well, this is it. We don't know who's around liable to be thrown up by activity. You see, where I come from, if you've got praxis and serendipity, well, you're looking around, but you're not exactly sure who we're looking for, and then maybe somebody will pop up. You've got to have your eyes open. But the other thing, if you want to make progress, is praxis. You have to take the first steps. So that's why I'm suggesting, you know, there's such a thing as an international competition to be the project manager of the year. It's a bit like the Eurovision Song Contest. And what was it? I think it was Belgrade. They won it. The Serbians won it, but they didn't want to hold the competition, so it went to Finland or something.
We're gonna have a swathe of ex-MSPs, SNP MSPs.
Yeah, but can you think of any of them that are charismatic enough to lead?
Well, I would quite like to see Jean Freeman there or thereabouts. She's very, very good when she's being interviewed under pressure. And that, in a way, is what we're looking for. Somebody who will bite back, what's his name? The radio guy, STV guy that led it last time.
Blair Jenkins.
Definitely wasn't.
No, he wasn't.
You know, whereas somebody like Jean Freeman that will bite back, will not be rode over. That's what I think we need more. And I don't think she's done anything but enhance her position as a possible candidate.
And she didn't, remember she, a few years, I think it was actually during the 2014 referendum, she had Andrew Neil for breakfast, didn't she?
Yeah. And if she's stepping out of the political arena, so I would suggest that, I mean, that would allow her not to be involved in the politics of Holyrood. I am no longer an MSP. Government policy is for the government, not for me, kind of stance. So that's maybe my top pick at the moment.
I'd just like to point out the other thing that came up. The reason that Peter Bell was talking about it today was that Kenny McCaskill, now I can't see him. I mean, I've great respect for Kenny, and when it comes to the foot soldiers getting arrested on Wembley Way, going to a Scotland-England football match and spending the whole game in cells, made him a bit of a folk hero. And at the moment, he is very much an outrider. He's an MP, he's an SNP MP, he's a senior MP, he's a senior member. he's certainly leading a charge for getting things moving. But he wanted, I think the reason Peter wrote an article was Kenny wanted a steering committee, and that doesn't sound like.
I think what I like most about it, and this is a piece he wrote in Wings again. He's becoming a real regular on Wings.
Well, it's a place to publish.
I think what I liked most about it was the people he counted out. Because I have a real problem with the convention lot.
Some of them are too close to
Commonweal.
Well, but some of them are too close to the SNP hierarchy too. Yeah, I mean, okay,
you know, I mean, it looks I don't like the feel of it.
I went to a meeting of the Scottish Independence Convention, and who was there? Elaine C. Smith.
Well, I taped their whole weekend at the Usher Hall.
Oh, so you did? I didn't go to that one, right?
And I mean, it was very woke.
Was it?
Good people there, but nah, it smelled Commonweal to me.
Oh, here's another point that Peter made that I quite liked in his article today. The yes movement needs not so much to lead. What it needs is a push. No, that may sound like a bit a trite little way to put it, but it is a different attitude. He's Peter's desperately trying to include the SNP. He just wants them to move us forward. I mean, he's of an age.
It's very politically, I mean, bit of political realism here. It would be very difficult for Sturgeon to start banging the drum during the pandemic.
Oh, she can't really do it. And then even if she wanted to, and I don't think she does.
So it's got to be a reaction from the grassroots, yes. And I see that as the best way to do it anyway. Get started now, make our mistakes early before the referendum's called in the run up to Holyrood. Give us a chance to look at who can be on a public platform and succeed. That's how I see this period.
So to some extent, that's what Gordon McIntyre Kemp is doing with his Believe in Scotland.
Yeah, well,
on Facebook. That's a new group that he got going, and he's drip feeding the results of polls he's done recently as well.
Well, that is a positive step. There's not been a big fanfare about it. It's toe in the water stuff in a lot of ways, but they're producing a lot of good stuff, which Mr. Robertson of Central Edinburgh fame singly has failed to do with whatever it was he set up. I can't even remember the name of it. I mean, where are they? I've seen nothing from them.
So what about, we need to tell the viewers and listeners, today's poll says that 83% of those asked thought it was likely that Scotland would vote for independence.
I didn't see that poll.
It's the one that...
I saw something tweeted about it, but I didn't go to source for it.
Let me just click it and bring it up. 83% of Scots are more likely to vote for independence. Sorry, I'm fibbing here. I better correct myself. 83% of Scots are more likely to vote for independence due to Boris Johnson. Sorry about that.
Right, okay.
So we don't want Boris to go. So we want Boris to stay. We want them to break the treaty so that we could...
You're trying to force me to say I want a Tory government in Westminster.
No.
That's what you're doing. You're asking me, basically...
No, I'm not. But
to commit suicide politically.
It takes us
saying the best thing for Scotland at the moment would be a Tory government in Westminster.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that takes us back to the early days in 2016 after the Brexit referendum, where the argument was, well, we'd better let them have their Brexit and then that'll kickstart independence. Now, it's got so messy since then. You wouldn't wish that on anyone.
I'm still amazed that we're not at 60%. Well, weren't at 60% 6 months ago.
Well,
independence, because how anybody can sit in Scotland and look at the Westminster government on the one hand, and then look at Holyrood on the other hand, and think there's even a choice. Why would you want Westminster to make decisions for you?
They get different press down south.
But I mean, how bad would it have to be, the Scottish government have to be, to even look a bit like the Westminster government?
Depends
it's
who you read.
Absolutely mind-bending.
I mean, there was another piece in the London Times today by some fellow, I'm sorry, can't remember his name. Oh yes, no, it wasn't in the Times. It was actually it was in Deutsche Welle, the German version of the BBC World Service. And he also writes for Forbes magazine. And he wrote the same article, rewrote it slightly. I have managed to read it in both of these international press outlets. And basically, it's a standard stuff. Yes, this is what's happening. Scotland there seems to be a move towards independence, but they can't afford it. And Nicola Sturgeon's government has been awful at dealing with this crisis. Hey-ho.
And you're not allowed to make comparisons. You know,
But
Tories stand up at Holyrood screaming and shouting about an inquiry into care homes in Scotland. Meanwhile, down at Westminster, they've actually refused an inquiry into care homes. And that, no, you can't count that. That's not Tory policy. I'm sorry, that is Tory policy.
You know, there is so much going on. We normally talk about almost every day at some point about a dead cat on the table to try and to distract us from what's really going on. There's so much going on. What else happened last night? The Grenfell, the fire, the Tories voted down, right? They've had an inquiry and they know who's at fault, and the Tories voted to take no action as a result of this public inquiry.
Having promised to implement the results of the inquiry.
And yet, we're not even talking about it. And yet, it matters. There are people here at Western Harbour, for example, who spent a fortune on their flats at Platinum Point. They can't sell them because the buildings are covered with the same cladding as Grenfell. And they're not worth it.
They're not. No, they're not.
Well, this is what
the problem now is. You don't need the same cladding as Grenfell. If you've got cladding, you now need a safety certificate.
Right, okay.
To sell your flat. And you
can't
get a safety certificate because there's only 100 people in the country qualified to do the work to produce that safety certificate.
I trust you because you were a fireman.
No, it's much bigger than that. It's now become, if you've got cladding, you've got a problem. It doesn't matter how good the cladding is, how safe the cladding is. You now need a piece of paper saying that it's safe, because mortgage companies won't give you a mortgage without it.
Some people are stuck in their flats and they can't sell them anyway.
Well, and the rules on the building safety rules in Scotland have always been different to England, and they're more stringent. So if the right stuff's being used, there shouldn't be a problem in Scotland. If the builder, on the other hand, has cut corners and bought the wrong stuff, you might have a problem, but you only know that once you get it tested. You know, so the vicious circle continues. When enough landlords start screaming at this Tory government that they can't rent their flats or they can't sell their flats or whatever, then the Tories will decide the government has to pay for it. Because that's what I heard somewhere, it was £53,000 some lassie had been asked to pay to get this testing done. It might have been for the whole building, but she wanted to sell. And obviously a lot of people don't have that kind of money lying about.
Just local or just? No,
this was actually down south.
I mean, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of blocks of flats that fall into that category. The block of flats I'm in has got wooden cladding.
Well, in Scotland, that'll have been treated.
Well, then they painted it with something.
And that
years
will,
ago.
you can't just paint it with paint. That will have been painted with fire retardant paint. There's rules about that sort of thing, man.
Okay.
And it being Council, it will have obeyed the rules.
So the question of the Brexit issue took us into independence and trust and all the rest of it. But I'd like to quote Paul Kavanagh about the Brexit issue at the moment, because he got very passionate in his article about it today. And he says here, the Tory government, they are charlatans, they're cheats. They took Scotland's no vote and have proceeded to trash the chance that Scotland gave them. They're trashing the devolution settlement, burning the union in a bonfire of their vanity. Oh, aye. If you're not angry, it's because you've not been paying attention. And then it says here in the end, it ends in the faux outrage of a Conservative MP who claims that the only reason the Labour Party brings in is in the wilderness in Scotland is because of the accent of its branch office manager. I can only recommend the article for its breadth and passion.
I find him quite verbose at the moment. Tends to say the same thing 3 times. But
the headline news that everybody needs to know is about the Brexit issue is that the UK's top legal civil servant has quit.
Well, that was kind of the gist of, it took a long time to get there.
Yeah.
So the man giving them legal advice has left the job. Yet another top civil servant leaving under pressure from Downing Street.
Yes, well, you know, he's left because of the government's behaviour. Their threat to ignore an international treaty. It's illegal, so he can't stay.
Well, keep a close eye on who takes his job.
His name is Jonathan Jones. As long as it's not Jim Jones.
Is that 10 now? 10 top civil servants gone?
He's head of the UK government's legal department, so he can't be much more, can't go higher than that, presumably.
Not now, he's not.
No, he's not now. And yeah, the FT reports because of was concerned that Boris Johnson was trying to overwrite parts of the Brexit agreement relating to Northern Ireland. What a wonderful country we live in.
You caught some of the Salmond Inquiry today.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that?
It was Leslie Evans was back again. Not so nervous this time. She's the permanent secretary, so she runs the government. If she's like Sir Humphrey, and if you think of Yes Minister, she's like Sir Humphrey. She is a very senior UK civil servant. She was back. Which was it? What was interesting was she was back side by side with James Wolfe, the Lord Chancellor. He's currently hanging on to his job with his fingernails, as far as I know, because as far as I know, he's admitted unlawfulness.
Well, it's termed a malicious.
A malicious prosecution of the liquidators of a Rangers football club. Now, he's hanging on to his job, but I would imagine, the question is, who's he accountable to? But anyway, the pair of them are side by side. They both use the same term. They both have official roles, but she's a civil servant. He's actually officially a minister in the Scottish government, but they both speak for the Scottish government. It's really weird.
Well, that's what they're there to do. They're not there in a personal. I don't understand why people have a problem with this. In a job like that, your personal opinion is irrelevant. You're there to enact government policy. Therefore, when you're in front of a committee, you're answering questions on behalf of the government, not your own opinions, etc.
Well, that's fair enough, but it is a bit confusing it's very confusing when you're writing notes. And this person is saying, and the government said, right, which government, and who's this saying it? You had to write down exactly who was talking about the government, because it depends who's talking about the government.
This is part of Cole Hamilton and Murdo Fraser's problem, is they don't want civil servants to be civil servants. They want them to be individuals who come with personal opinions.
But
and answer their questions from a personal point of view.
This was my problem trying to write notes, because one of them is a civil servant and the other one is, well, he's the Lord Advocate, but officially he's a minister. So they both speak for the government, but they've got different... I was left... Anyway, I'll tell you this much. When he sat down and he took the oath, he had no problem with the oath, unlike Leslie Evans last week or 2 weeks ago when she took the oath. She had to be coached. Of course, he's a lawyer, and there was a joke made about that because he rattled it off. But apart from that, his initial responses, he was nervous. Anybody watching that will tell you he was nervous. So
well, it's interesting. Wings has done some good journalism on this. Wings has been firing letters at various departments to do with Scots law, trying to find out who is responsible for the decisions that were made. It started really about the Craig Murray case and the jigsaw identification of the women in the Alex Salmond trial.
Alphabet women are called, aren't
Yeah,
they?
sorry, the alphabet women. And he was trying to find out who made the decision to take Craig Murray to court. And because effectively Sturgeon has stepped away, she's
recused herself,
yes, to use her own words. Yeah, recused herself. Nobody seems to be able to fire the people who made the mistakes or are presumed to have made the mistakes. So Wings has been firing off letters, and of course, one complaint sent to the complaints department of one authority has told them to go and speak to another authority, who's told them to go and speak to the original authority, blah, blah, blah. So he's having a lot of problem being able to find somebody to point the finger at. As in the case of Mr. Wolfe, who is a minister and is therefore really the only person that can fire him is Nicola.
Mm-hmm. Mind you, we missed out on this because in the middle of the presser today, she was asked a political question about the Alex Salmond case, and she said, but I recused myself from that affair. The question was actually about the provision of documents by Leslie Evans, the permanent secretary, to this inquiry. What's happened to these documents everybody wants to see? And the First Minister said herself, I recuse myself from this and therefore I will not answer.
Well, no, therefore I know nothing about the decision making. I can't answer. And because this is a political question, I won't answer.
Because this press briefing is all about the virus. However, if you were watching the inquiry as I was, some of the questions that are asked at this inquiry are trying to find out what the First Minister knew and when, because the First Minister was involved in the early part of the process. To the iteration, the process was developed. They had draft versions of what would happen if they had a complaint about bullying. And up to a certain point and a certain date, in December 2017, the First Minister was kept abreast of it, as was the Permanent Secretary. And then after a certain date, the First Minister was formally knew nothing about it.
No, when she was told there was an inquiry in Salmond, she went, right, that's it. I can't make decisions on this. It's up to you, Leslie.
Well, the story is, of course, that before that even happened, she recused herself from it. They cut. There's still some dispute. This is why they're still after more documents. Exactly what the First Minister knew. She knew all about where they were going, and I think what happened was when the First Minister could see where it was going, and before she could be asked a question, she said, "I need to be recused. Yeah. I'm not staying it." And she had to do that because she, at that point, was responsible. If there was a complaint about a minister, it had to be dealt with under the ministerial code, and she would have had to be in charge of that.
And that is one of the reasons that this new system was put in place. It allowed her not to be involved.
Quite.
So
Well, it's
they're going to turn what should have been a good, fair, and decent way to deal with complaints against ministers into a big stick to beat the person that wanted it to be a good, fair, and reasonable way to make complaints about ministers.
and we're still left with the anomaly. They went through all this process to so-called to sort out the Me Too issue in the Scottish government, inside the Scottish government, and only one person has ever been charged.
Yep. So that's the way it goes.
And
Anyway,
I've got to ask you, Nori, what was the dead cat today?
there are so many dead cats swimming in this sea of lies and spin that I couldn't tell you whether it's a dead cat from last week, this week, or tomorrow.
Is it just that there's so much, honestly, there is just so much news going on, but we can't tell the dead cats from the real stories?
Well, I would go further than that. I would go so far as to say there is so much lying going on, so much spin going on, that it is near impossible to sort the dead cats from the chaff.
Well, looking behind you at your background with the headlines in the Daily Telegraph, it would appear that the Daily Telegraph want rid of Boris Johnson, whereas you and I now want him to stay.
No, this one is Boris signing the deal so we could get out of Europe. This one is him saying that the deal never made sense. So effectively, he signed a deal that never made sense.
So you don't think the Daily Telegraph wanted to go?
I don't think the Daily Telegraph even know what the Daily Telegraph want now. I think that they've managed to make it so confusing that nobody is sure what a good deal, bad deal, Tuesday, Wednesday, Mrs. Mops, Plimsolls. It's got to the stage now where they are either going to break 3 treaties, or they're bluffing about breaking one of them, possibly 2 of them, or it was all a big mistake and they didn't get Dominic Cummings' email, or the EU made it all up and there are German tanks waiting to invade Dover.
And we haven't even mentioned the impact on Scotland and the power grab, because it's the same bill. It's the internal market bill. It's the same bill that is keep taking. It's this power grab from Scotland.
Yep.
And this law grab on the Scottish legal system. My goodness, what a mess.
I mean, if you sit and think about it, we are literally in a lifeboat at the moment. It just hasn't been launched. The feeling, it's so precarious. I mean, the Tories have lost any chance of a trade deal with America if they go through and put the new Good Friday Agreement in jeopardy, because the Irish blood that flows through the Senate, they will not ratify it.
No, they won't. There's a chair of the trade committee. He's pro-Irish. Biden's pro-Irish.
So even if we get a no-deal Brexit, we're going to end up with a no chance of any deal international trade situation. Why is anybody going to trust us? There you are. Sign that. No tariffs. 2 minutes later, we're going to have to charge you tariffs on your ice cream or whatever. But the treaty says you're not going to do that. But sovereignty, mate, sovereignty.
I saw something last night. Apparently, if there's no deal, beef producers in Scotland will face a 40% tariff on their beef being sold to France.
It won't be worth being in any business at all unless it involves using money to make money.
Oh, well, that's
The,
another thing. We'll need to save
the
that for
tariff
another
on
day.
sheep is, I think, even bigger than that. You won't be able to get fish to market because you'll be sitting in Dover for 3 days. I mean, the tariff on fish is colossal as well. So anybody that produces anything might as well go out to the shed and run their own tractor over them.
Apparently, the Scottish market for shellfish has already gone. It's already been snapped up by other countries. And I read somewhere that Britain, this hadn't made the headlines yet. It must have been in one of the financial papers. Britain is threatening to not allow, apparently the FTSE 100, 3/4 of the companies on the FTSE 100 are actually European companies. And the reason they're on the FTSE 100 is so that they can use the London market to raise capital. And anyway, the Tory government are threatening they won't be allowed to raise capital in the London market if they don't get their way on this.
Well, do you know what? They'll go somewhere else.
I suspect they will.
That's what will happen. And you know all the capital that floats about the London market looking for somebody to take it. It'll go to the same place that people looking for the capital go.
Well, and there's also a theory that the value of London, which is completely artificial, all the property values and all the rest of it, given that huge percentage of people are never going to go back to the office now that they've discovered they can work from home, the value of all these office blocks in London, the wages, the salaries, the inflated salaries, the London waiting, and the value of all this property with people no longer wanting to be in London could collapse.
And guess what? That's all those private pension funds money.
Mm-hmm. Oh well.
So,
not looking good.
On that happy note.
Yes, on that happy note, I would leave you with this thought. If I was a young man, I'd be looking to get myself a croft on an island, and self-sufficiency would be the idea.
If I was a young man, I'm sorry, I'd be looking to move to New Zealand.
There's an option.
Or possibly Australia. Okay, we'll call it a day at that. Thanks for listening, folks. Thank you, Stuart. And Laurie, Stuart.
You have a nice day today, Notary.
Oh, of course. Well, it's my birthday, isn't it?
Yeah, happy birthday.
So hopefully we'll have Jimmy Hutton back with us tomorrow. But thanks for listening, folks, and we'll catch you all tomorrow. Cheers for now.